Hello and welcome to the Cinementalist podcast for cinementalist.com. My name is Andy. Sitting opposite me is Liam. Sitting next to me is Floki, our bearded dragon mascot. And Jesus Christ, is it hot in here?
It is a bit, yeah.
Apologies if there's a little bit of background noise this week. We decided to try and record without a fan last week. And we have to close all the doors and the windows for sound purposes. And we nearly died.
Yeah. Very unpleasant.
So. By the time we got to the premium podcast, we were pretty much delirious. I'm going to edit that tomorrow and I'm dreading it. Because I think we were both just going, yeah, films. But yeah, hopefully our noise removal software will take most of this out. But if you can hear a bit of background noise, we do apologise. Please take it as a caveat that this stops us from being really, really bad at reviewing films and TV.
Indeed. Yeah. Please forgive us.
How have you been, dude? You okay?
Yeah, good, man. I'm all fired up now.
Oh, yes. Yeah, of course you had your first vaccine as well. Did you get the sweats?
No, I just felt like somebody had whacked me really hard in the arm a good few times, and that subsided after a day or two.
Oh, okay. So you got the easy ride of it. That's good.
Yeah, it's fine.
Not jealous in the slightest.
So halfway there, until the next round, and then it might be, I don't know, 2 weeks of chills and diarrhea and.
Yeah, you never know, right? It's the lucky dip.
Maybe even a bit of death.
Yes, it's the lucky dip of COVID symptoms, isn't it? You never know what you're going to get. Isn't that fantastic? But yes, other than that, we are alive and well, just a little bit sweaty. Right, let's do some film news, shall we?
Please do.
Let's kick off. This week is very much the week of announcing sequels, so prepare yourself, for there are many. First of which, got an article here from Empire. A Kingpin sequel is in the works.
No.
The Farrelly brothers haven't shied away from revisiting some of their comedy back catalogue. They brought the world Dumb and Dumber 2, which I believe you hated.
It was bullshit, yeah.
And now it appears they're ready to go back to the world of Kingpin, setting up a potential sequel. According to Collider, Peter and Bobby Farrelly are on board to, at the very least, produce a Kingpin follow-up at Village Roadshow Pictures. Although details beyond that are pretty much non-existent, so we don't know if they'll direct or have anything to do with the screenplay. In case you need a reminder, the first film starred Woody Harrelson, blah, blah, blah. I mean, do we need...
Is it gonna involve Woody or Randy Quaid or Vanessa Angel? Is it gonna involve any of them in any way? I mean...
Well, Randy Quaid has sort of blotted his Hollywood copybook, I think, for a start. Because he went cuckoo conspiracy theory batshit.
Oh, yeah, he's fucking mad. Yeah,
and not in the mad way that Hollywood sometimes tolerates. If you start going down the don't drink the water, it's going to give you horns.
He went really, really off base.
Yeah, he went really fruity loopy nuts of weed, didn't he? And Bill Murray could well be up for it, I suppose. He seems like the kind of guy that doesn't he have a famous thing about he's got an answering machine. And he just encourages everybody who wants to pitch him an idea, just call up this number, leave it on the answering machine.
Yeah.
Never think it's any good, I'll get back to you.
But the thing is, Big Ernie McCracken is actually one of Bill Murray's greatest characters. And that's the guy with a lot of them. So, I mean...
This is the problem as well, because there's been such a big gap between the original release.
Yeah, it's 1996, I think, the first one.
Yeah, I mean, that I don't think that big gap kind of thing often works for these kind of sequels. I think if you're going to do a sequel, and oftentimes it's a bad idea, and sometimes they turn out well, but I think you really need to be within a 5-year window of the original. Just to, otherwise, in some weird way in your head, I think in the audience's mind, you've lost some of the momentum. And seeing those characters again, except everyone's obviously aged, and you have to remind them of the previous narrative, and they don't tend to work very well with a big gap.
It's weird. I just never, even when they try and resurrect comedy, well, not even necessarily when they try and resurrect franchises, when they literally just do a sequel to a standalone film. 9 times out of 10, it's always okay, now the humour in the film is really anemic.
Yeah,
people don't seem to just fit in that character's shoes as well as they did previously. It's like they I don't know, I think a lot of some creative teams seem to take it for granted, this the first one was popular, so we'll get the same people back on board, they'll be able to just snap right back into it. Well, no, they can't.
If I remember correctly as well, Kingpin, I don't think it did actually that well at the box office. It became a cult hit a little while later. And that, even more reason not to revisit it at this late date, I think. But, as usual, we're rubbishing something before we've seen it. It's just none of the signs look particularly good.
I think I've always been a really big fan of Kingpin. I think it's one of Farrelly's best films. It's a it's a great comedy. And, I don't know. If the people behind the suggestion, if they're doing it out of love for Kingpin, well, why don't you just re-release Kingpin?
Yeah.
It's what I say about all these sequels long after the fact and all these remakes. We want to draw attention to the original. There is this thing called re-releases.
Yeah, remaster it a little bit,
Yeah.
maybe. I don't know if there's a Blu-ray release for Kingpin, but do that and maybe throw in some edited scenes or whatever. I mean, director's cuts can go up and down too, but yeah, if the original is such a loved classic, then often it's best to leave it that way, I think.
Yeah.
More sequel news. Bill Skarsgård has been added to the cast for John Wick 4. Yes,
Okay.
they're making another one.
Wow. Jesus Christ.
Not much is known about the story for the new Wick, although obviously Keanu Reeves' titular badass will be battling enemies once again, this time alongside Donnie Yen as an old friend, while stowaways Shamir Anderson and singer Rina Sawayama are also aboard. Chad Stahelski is once more directing, with the script this time from Shay Hatton and Michael Finch, and the cameras should be rolling this summer in France, Germany, and Japan. You really liked, what was it, that Bob Odenkirk, Nobody, was it?
Yeah, Nobody was...
Wasn't that the same director?
The same writer.
Oh, same writer, right.
Yeah,
okay.
it was, Nobody was fun. It was so relentlessly and intentionally batshit in I know that I think I said before, I don't think that the John Wick franchise, I don't think you could accuse it of taking itself super seriously.
No,
I think it definitely knows that its action sequences are immense flights of fancy and, wonderfully catering to audience expectations of bangy, smash punch shooty. But, yeah, with Nobody, the placing of Bob Odenkirk was just a good thing that cemented it as a very self-aware black comedy.
Well, especially because he's known so well as being like a comedy actor. That sort of adds a little
Yeah,
something
well,
to it, doesn't it?
I was first introduced to him in Breaking Bad, and I became aware that he was in Mr. Show in the States, because we don't get Mr. Show over here as far as I'm aware.
No, or Saturday Night Live for that matter, which I believe he's appeared on many, many times. He's sort of one of those sketch comedy faces, isn't he? But I've yet to check out Nobody, but I remember your review being incredibly positive.
Well, the funniest thing about it is that Bob Odenkirk doesn't, he plays it completely dry and straight, which just makes it funnier, because there's just something about him, where he's just able to play his sort of doing it morose and doing it understated. Just he just has that ability to make it even funnier than if he was acting out. So you should see Nobody, because it's just good fun.
Yeah, it is on my list. That is, especially given your positive review. This is one I'm actually really interested in. Well, it's supposed to be supposedly a prequel to 2003's Master and Commander.
Russell Crowe fighting around the world.
This is actually probably my favourite Russell Crowe performance. I really liked the original Master and Commander. And of course, they're based off of the Patrick O'Brien books, so there's a lot of meat on the bone there. Another Patrick, a chaos-walking book creator, Ness, is on board this time with the aim for a story that will outline how Captain Jack Aubrey, played by Crowe in 2003, and ship surgeon Stephen Malterin, Bettany in the film, meet when Aubrey is given his first command. That's a weirdly written sentence. From the sounds of it, unless de-aging technology is employed, new actors will take over the roles. Technically, this will see Ness adapting Master and Commander, the first book since Weir's film drew from several tomes, but didn't reference one specifically. There's no director or cast anywhere near this, but honestly, we'd like to see Weir give another crack at the concept if he wants it. Again, this is from Empire. Despite 10 Oscar nominations, the original film's less than ship-shape $200 million from a $150 million budget meant a follow-up didn't float. That's interesting. I would have thought, Master and Commander, in my mind, that was a really, really big film, but apparently it didn't do all that well in the box office.
And it was a very, very good film as well.
I think that's a period of history that is yet to be properly mined. I really love that sort of naval, that 18th, 17th century naval stuff.
Crowe and Bettany inhabited those roles so well. I have no inclination to see anybody else occupy them. It's just, I really don't. I know, we're going in again, it's like judging something, before it's even been manufactured yet, by the sounds of it. But Jesus Christ. What are you doing? Just leave it alone. Leave it alone, or if you have to, see if Crowe and Bettany are interested in a reprisal, because then it may very well be halfway tolerable.
Well, I'm a little bit more positive on this, I think. Maybe it's just because I've got a real interest in that bit of history. But what I really liked about Master and Commander is it got the sort of drama of those action sequences really, really well. It did that nice contrast between scenes of them sitting around the captain's table and the sort of the political debates and all that, interpersonal drama in between really, really dangerous battles. I mean, battles of that time, that sort of naval history was, it was full of cannonballs and splinters and legs being chopped off, and it was just such a gruesome period of history.
Yeah,
that I thought was really brought alive really, really nicely. So I don't know. I mean, I'm fairly down.
It's not a film. I mean, because we're obviously active on film Twitter a lot. I'm sure that some people are bandied it about, but Master and Commander is a film that I seldom see referenced on there.
I see the odd GIF.
Yeah,
that's about
this
it.
is literally the odd GIF, which is a shame because, you know, but then I'm asking myself, well, why don't you fucking send more out about it? You know,
Well, maybe we should review it.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, absolutely.
Maybe a lot of people haven't seen it.
Yeah, we should do at least, you know, we should do a healthy extra take on it one time. I think.
Yeah, you know, I might. I'm pretty sure my girlfriend hasn't seen it. I might go back and rewatch it.
I think it's a film that merits discussion, definitely.
Do an extra take on the premium or something like that. Yeah,
Why
because
not?
it is a good film, and it seems like for some reason it deserves more of an audience. So yeah, happy to provide. And my last bit of sequel news here. This is a potential sequel to Joker, the Joaquin Phoenix version. Reports that co-writer director Todd Phillips is in talks to handle a new film, which has been denied by official channels. Prepare your grains of sand then for another quick mention, which emerged via a Hollywood Reporter story on Phillips' lawyer, and word that the filmmaker is at least in the midst of a deal to co-write a new installment. Whether this means continuing the story of Joaquin Phoenix's Arthur Fleck or some other strand remains to be seen for now. And of course, this isn't exactly official confirmation from Warner Brothers DC, although this isn't the only news source I've seen talking about this. There are little sources and little reports going forward that Joker did so well that they want an extra installment.
Well, there's no surprise there, but still, I mean, you know, the ending shot of Arthur being chased down the corridors of the psychiatric hospital. That's, I mean, that ultimately works.
It does feel
if it's left as a standalone.
It feels very self-contained, that film, doesn't it? Yeah. And again, yeah, if there's mileage left in the character, I mean, there's obviously definitely mileage left in the character. There's definitely mileage left in the performance. But when you write the first film so neatly packaged like that, to open it back up again is asking for lesser writing, isn't it? I mean, there was a spark of genius in that film that was what made it what it is. To recapture that lightning.
It's frustrating because with so many films that are self-contained, and I mean, I like Joker, but when you have something that ends on in a particularly memorable fashion, which I think that was, you know, that has like a sort of lasting frame that will be somewhat iconic because of his journey as an anti-hero. I just think it's all well and good to imagine the conclusion of a character's arc, you know, off screen. Once the credits have rolled, your imagination fills in the blanks about X and Y, what could have possibly happened to them. But when somebody creates sequels, there's somebody who's actually, you know, now in reality, they've substantiated a continuation, and it usually just sucks all the fucking air out of the initial work. And I just find it so frustrating. You know?
It's the very corporate and business-like nature of what is, you know, we talk about movies, obviously, we talk about TV. They are primarily corporate interests and they are business interests. And this is the unfortunate part where creativity and business do not meet, is that occasionally writers and directors are almost forced back into the chair. You know, there is always that thing about maintaining your artistic integrity and going, no, I won't do it. But then you open up the possibility that, I mean, you don't own the rights to Joker. You could have a lesser writer, lesser directors, lesser actors. You know, they could end up butchering the original that way. So I totally get why directors often go back to these things and go, oh, okay, well, you know, if you're going to do another one, it better be me in charge of it.
Did you know, sorry for, don't want to be shamelessly self-indulgent by relentlessly bringing it up, but did you know that initially people approached Michael Mann when he did Thief and asked him to make the film a bit more open-ended so they could potentially franchise it with James Caan?
No, I didn't. That's an interesting bit of trivia.
Yeah, they actually had like a scene after the traditional ending where it's essentially a happy ending. And to imitate Caan himself, I read that in this initial script and thought, whoa, God. Yeah, it's good that they left that out. Initially, a couple of people said like, oh, well, you know, you've got James Caan on board. He's still quite popular with the audiences, so maybe we could turn this into a series of crime films. And I think ultimately Mann was just like, nah, I don't think so. Which was the correct decision.
I think probably back when the directors had a bit more weight and that kind of thing as well, and rights were a little bit different to the way they are now.
Definitely, yeah.
It's a sign of the times.
That would have just been so terrible.
But you know, as we've said before many, many times, with some of these sequels and prequels, they may end up being great films, and in which case we will review them. So, however, more original ideas, please. It's always nice when we see more original content rather than simply churning through some stuff that already worked to see whether you might milk the cash cow once more. That would be ideal.
What is it? Pretty please with sugar on top. Come up with your own fucking ideas.
And that's the weekly message from CINEMENTALIST. Okie dokie then, well that ends the very disappointing news this week. However, Liam, as usual, has a couple of films for us. What have you got for us this week, mate?
What's your opinion of the Conjuring franchise?
I thought it was okay, yeah.
Yeah.
It did scare me, which is rare actually for not being Captain Billy Big Bollocks or anything, but a lot of times they don't work for me. I was scared by The Conjuring.
I thought the first one was decent. I went in expecting it.
This is exactly the same as we did last week with the Saw franchise, by the way. Actually. You opened by asking me, and I went, the first one's pretty good, the rest
this is the problem because,
right after we've ranted about sequels as well.
Because 1 and 2 were directed by James Wan, who was previously affiliated with the Saw franchise. And the first Conjuring, released in 2013, it was 2013, wasn't it? 2013 or 2014, shit, I can't remember exactly. But I thought, this is quite interesting because even though I personally don't believe in the paranormal, they adapted the purported real-life exploits of Ed and Lorraine Warren, a real-life husband and wife demonologist team who were prolifically involved in a lot of poltergeist hauntings and attacks that drew a lot of mass media attention. And I thought this is a really interesting approach because they're fictionalizing what the couple purported to be true events. And, from records kept by police and records kept anecdotally, etc., they weave that into a genuinely, into a supernatural narrative. And I just thought it worked quite well.
I've just looked it up. It was 2013.
It was 2013. Right. So the because the first Conjuring melded ostensible facts with your typical horror film fare in a rather stable, inventive way, I thought that was pretty decent. Second one dropped off in standards and quality a little bit more. The third one, this latest one, The Devil Made Me Do It, it's got a new director, Michael Chaves. So
I love that byline, by the way. The Conjuring 3, The Devil Made Me Do It.
The Devil Made Me Do It. Well, because it's so named for the media shorthand for an actual case that took place in the United States in 1981, the Devil Made Me Do It case.
I'm just reading here, actually, that's wrong, The Conjuring 3. The 8th installment in the Conjuring universe?
What?
That's what Wikipedia says.
Because of stuff like Annabelle and the Nun.
Yeah, it says the film serves as a sequel to The Conjuring 2013 and The Conjuring 2 2016, and as the 8th installment in the Conjuring universe. How many of these have I missed?
There were several Annabelles, though, wasn't there? I think there were like 4 fucking Annabelles.
Right, okay. Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's fine. Yeah, no, you're right. So, the 8th film in the Conjuring universe, but the third film to carry the Conjuring title. So this is directed by Michael Chaves, so James Wan isn't in the hot seat anymore. And this opens with Ed and Lorraine at the home of 8-year-old David Glatzel in 1981. In the opening scene, we're made aware that David has spent a considerable amount of time very, very unwell because he has been possessed by a demon. And Ed they put him down on a table in the front room, and they're performing an exorcism. Ed and Lorraine are there. A priest is there. Little David's sister, Debbie, is there. And Debbie's, I can't remember if it's her fucking boyfriend or her husband, actually. But I know her boyfriend or her fiancé. But her fiancé, Arnie Johnson, is there. And they're all surrounding poor little David as he contorts and twists and screams. And his skin bears horrifying lesions. And the demon does a lot of Pazuzu-esque stuff by speaking through him. It's very, very exorcisty so far. And it's quite a harrowing opening sequence. And eventually it culminates in, number one, Ed Warren has a heart attack. A non-fatal one, obviously. Otherwise, the film wouldn't revolve around the couple, would it? And Arnie Johnson, little David's, I suppose you could call him his future brother-in-law, I guess. He rages at the demon and says, leave him alone. He's just a little kid. Leave him alone. Take me instead. And it seems that the demon does actually vacate young David's body. And it cuts to a next scene where things are essentially normal. So I thought, fucking hell, they'll get over that quickly. And, Ed and Lorraine are kind of, they go back home and they're in touch with the family and saying, let us know if everything's going okay and we'll check up on you and stuff. Little David seems to be right as rain again. Arnie and Debbie, they live together and they both work in a dog kennel that is owned and managed by the couple's landlord, a guy named Bruno. I think in real life, this guy's name was his surname was Bono, but in the film, they just decided to name him Bruno.
Just in case you two's copyright lawyers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just go like,
I'm sure that's trademarked.
I am the most important man in the world. Who the fuck do you think you are using my name, you bastards?
Every time I clap, a child dies.
Yeah.
It's not funny, but it is. It's funny when Bono does it. I don't know why. Anyway.
But so yes, Arnie and Debbie, they're living together. Their landlord is also their manager at this dog kennel, and it turns out that Arnie's berating of the demon and insistence that the demon leave David alone and occupy him instead just might have been capitulated to, because Arnie starts to feel very, very weird. He becomes very nauseous and pallid. He can't sleep properly because he's overwhelmed by lots of whispering, loud voices in his head. He begins to see very strange things. And one afternoon, during a particularly intense sort of social interaction involving him and Debbie and their landlord, Arnie ends up stabbing the landlord 22 times. And this goes to court, and Ed and Lorraine are contacted by the family, and Ed and Lorraine advise Arnie's attorney to go before the court and enter a plea of not guilty on the grounds of demonic possession. And the lawyer understandably goes, "Are you fucking kidding me?" She's like, "That's never been done before." And the Warrens are like, "Yes, it has. There were cases in the UK where that was presented to the court." She's like, "Okay, let me qualify. That's never been done before successfully."
I seem to remember we covered that on the trivia at some point. I did some trivia about demonic possession, and it has actually been used.
Yeah, I think in 1975, Michael Taylor, he was a British guy, and it's quite brutal actually, because he was exorcised during a church meeting. And about a week later, he killed his wife and their dog by ripping them both to pieces with his bare hands.
Wow.
Very, very grisly stuff. And a lot of people still swear to this day that he was demonically possessed, because he was actually let out of a secure psychiatric ward because he was deemed to be fit to reintegrate society. But then they banged him up again literally a few years ago because he started exhibiting the same batshit crazy behaviour. Wow. So, can't falsify that he isn't inhabited by a demon. Maybe he's just severely mentally ill and nobody's taking it seriously.
Very probably.
Yes. Yeah. It's just the skeptic.
As we concluded in the trivia for that bit, I seem
to
remember.
But basically, the Warrens say to the lawyer, "Well, come round our house then, and we'll show you what we've got." And basically the next scene, it doesn't actually show Arnie's lawyer at their house. It just cuts to the courtroom where she's looking visibly shaken and horrified. So it's obviously intimating that they more or less substantiated the other realm for her. So Arnie is placed into a secure unit, and the Warrens are basically told they're probably going to the prosecutor's probably going to go for the death penalty for this kid. So if you think you can prove that his hand was forced by some kind of evil entity, then you need to fucking get to it now, because he doesn't have a lot of time. And so the Warrens go about their business trying to unearth where this thing or things came from that initially were terrorizing little David Glatzel, but are now, potentially going to send Arnie to the electric chair. And, and they basically go on a very dark sojourn into a world involving the occult and master Satanists and seances and just very crazy shit. Very crazy stuff that's territorial in The Conjuring.
Sure, yeah.
But unfortunately, it just doesn't really come together. This film has so many sequences in it that you can just immediately detect that they chucked their fucking nuts into making this as effectively jump scary and spine tingling and ratcheting up the tension as possible. But all of the scares in it are really, really predictable and goofy and haphazard. There's a fucking, as opposed to, they don't rely on atmosphere. At least the first one had some good atmospheric pluses that you could bang on about, I would say. They actually managed
I do remember being genuinely scared by it at points.
Yeah, they affected a really, a nicely spooky atmosphere, a hair-raising atmosphere. There was a lot about the initial Conjuring where you think this is actually a reasonably disturbing film. Whereas in the Devil Made Me Do It, it's there's so much bad camera work as well. There's one scene where Arnie is in the psychiatric the secure unit, the psychiatric prison, whatever you want to call it. And there's a sequence that involves him ambiguously hallucinating, or is he being terrorized by the demon? And there's lots of swirly, out of focus camera work that just reminded me of a very shoddy, 2:00 in the morning Channel 5 film. You get some cheap and nasty thriller made on a budget of a ham sandwich. And I just thought, what the fuck? They had more than enough money for this. This is a ongoing successful franchise. Why does so many scenes in this film look so fucking fuzzy and crap? And pretty much all of the antagonists, they just completely deflate the fear quotient. Because for a while there, after the initial exorcism of the kid, and when the scene where Arnie attacks his landlord, I thought that was quite well done. That was an effective jumpy moment. I quite liked that. It sets up this mystery that briefly did tantalize me. I thought I'm quite interested in where this is going. It seemed kind of spooky so far. There's a lot of ominous stuff in here. People talking about master Satanists. I wonder if it will be someone who is closer than they appear, or if there's something else that's really interestingly esoteric that will really surprise the audience. It's like, nah, just a very unimaginative load of pap, actually, with some really god-awful twists. And pathos that was just pulled straight out of the, it's like that, there's got to be a movie warehouse somewhere where there's a drawer marked saccharine arsehole. Let's pull this idea, because, pulling ideas out of an arsehole, but this is a particularly saccharine arsehole. It's just an arsehole that's just encrusted with the most twee, sugary infection that you could possibly. It's like,
it's quite a vivid image you're casting for our audience there. I hope no one's eating.
Yeah, well, sorry, guys. But,
they should know better.
Can't lay it on thick enough. But yeah, it's just, Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga, I've never thought either of them were particularly fantastic actors, but I liked their work in the first one. But in this, they're going through the motions. And like we've said many times before, I think with any franchise, because there are several franchises I like, and the reason I like them is because the films stand by themselves. If I know that it's obviously completely different genre, but you don't have to watch Die Hard in order to enjoy Die Hard 2.
Yeah.
And you don't have to watch.
I know what you mean, actually, that a good sequel should really be self-contained in some form.
In some form, yeah. So you don't, your capacity to, if that's the first, say you're introduced to the second or third film in the franchise, if the film is structured in such a way that your capacity to understand it isn't overly reliant on having seen previous installments, then I'd say that's a sign of it working. This film, it's just it's like Farmiga and Wilson seem to be occupying their roles so lazily that it feels very much like this film was literally just made for the obsessive fans of the Conjuring universe in general. It really smacks of that to me. And that's another reason why I just think it just doesn't work. It's not scary. Most of the acting is quite lazy. The plot developments they're nonsensical. It's like, it's for, sometimes you'll get a bad twist and you'll think, oh, well, okay, I'll see what they were trying to do there. They didn't successfully execute it, but I kind of see what they were trying to do there. In this one, there were twists where I just went, huh? Why? What's the point of that? What is that supposed to add to the narrative? What are we supposed to derive from that? That's bollocks. So, Yeah, I wouldn't recommend it, unfortunately. It's just
Shame.
Yeah, just I wasn't impressed. Very very, very silly.
Especially given your predilection towards horror as well. I always think when you review a horror film, you have a tendency to be more forgiving towards it because you love the genre so much. And
But don't forget, I am, I'm a, when it comes to horror, I'm quite snobbish because I like my art housey horror that is mostly predicated on mood.
Sure.
And
just didn't do it for you, this one, huh?
It was far too Hollywoodized, man. The first one had something about it. It rolled with certain punches. It had an intelligent way of making, something that, as far as I'm concerned, was the hoaxy work of a couple of charlatans into an effective horror movie, treating it as though this was
those events really did happen.
Yes, this is consensus reality happenstance. This is how it actually went, and the way they stuck quite faithfully to things that were recorded at the time, that was good. This just veers so wildly away from that kind of approach. That is just a really bad, cheap, and nasty horror film that will be a waste of your time to watch. So, yeah.
Hey ho.
Second up, I only heard about this film a couple of days ago, actually, and I thought I'd stick it on because it sounded quite interesting. But this is Flashback. Its original title was The Education of Frederick Fritzl. Frederick Fitzel. Sorry, not Fritzl.
Not Fritzl.
Yeah. Yes, because Fritzl is a bad surname.
Yes, that's not one you want anymore.
No, I think it's actually Frederick Fitzel. Sorry, not Fritzl. And
you're just giving some PR guy out there a heart attack,
Yeah. What? But this is a very mad and interesting one, actually. So this the title character, Fred Fitzel, is played by Dylan O'Brien, and he's a young guy. He's about, I don't know, late 20s, early 30s. He's an information analyst. And he's got a lovely fiance, and they live they've just bought a lovely new apartment, and he makes quite nice money. He seems to be doing quite well for himself. He's quite despondent recently because his mother is occupying a hospital bed, has been for a considerable amount of time, and she's recently developed aphasia, which makes it virtually impossible for her to speak. So life is, he's upwardly mobile essentially, but events in his life he just seems to feel a bit bereft. Seems to feel at a loss in a sea of chaos. He's not really sure where his life is going, and he always seems very perturbed. Well, one day he starts having these very, very strange, vivid, and intense flashbacks to his year as a high school senior when he was on the verge of graduating, and we basically delve into Freddie's past and his addiction to this drug called Mercury. There was an epidemic of this mystery designer drug named Mercury at Freddie's high school, and he fell in with a clique who were heavily addicted to it. You've got Sebastian, played by Emery Cohen, who's up and coming in a lot of things. He basically plays a sort of quite a thuggish truant there who is initially hostile towards Fred, but then they start to sort of develop a kind of an uneasy connection because he coerces Fred one day into hiding drugs for him because Fred wouldn't be suspected, and that sort of gains Sebastian's trust, and Sebastian introduces him to Andre, played by Kia Gilchrist, and Cindy Williams, played by the lovely Micah Monroe. Micah Monroe and Kia Gilchrist were both also in It Follows, actually, which was a nice little connection there. And so Fred starts to fall in with this crew, and he starts to ingest this drug Mercury, which has some phenomenally singular physiological and psychological effects. This is essentially Fred's journey into unpredictably arriving non-linear realities. And it's mostly left up to audience interpretation, but I think the film can be read that this drug, I think for the rest of your life, it unpredictably splits time for you in a sort of multiverse fashion. And I mentioned It Follows. There's a lot about this film atmospherically that reminded me of It Follows. But not because of central conceits, but more it follows, doesn't have a specific time, place, era that it's taking place in. Everything seems very oniric in an understatedly unsettling way. And Flashback very much has that kind of aesthetic about it in terms of the cinematography. Turns out the soundtrack to this movie is actually great. By Pilot Priest, he does this wonderful synthwave score that's very, very emotive and poignant. He was the guy who wrote and directed it. Do you remember when I talked about that Canadian film called Come True?
Yeah.
And it had that really, really profound and memorable electro score. Well, he also did the score for Flashback, which I think does compound a lot of emotional power in this film, which this film does have a lot of. But I was immersed in my viewing experience of this, and I did enjoy the fact that I sat down and watched it, because there's a lot of really, really intriguing stuff going on here, because the drug, it fucks with people's perception of non-linear time. And there's one point where Cindy and Fred and also other characters, they get into conversations about things like free will and existential and epistemological nihilism and will to power, and is this drug actually providing some kind of liberty, or there are other scenes where he keeps having these very disturbing visions of a sort of a weird young androgynous hooded kid who he would always see around when he was younger, who talks to him in a very sort of very unnatural voice about how he actually has an invasive life form, has essentially deformed his brain into conforming with societal expectations that are not innate or inherent or necessary. It gets like whacked out philosophical, this film.
I love that kind of stuff when you do that sort of existentialist sci-fi.
Yeah, and this is the thing.
Quantum mechanic, multiple universe,
and
time bending kind of stuff.
It does have that, this film, and I think ultimately Flashback has that to a degree that is very emotionally effective. It is very poignant, thematically and sonorifically. As I said, the OST is really great, and I really like the look of the film as well, and the performances are all really good. And ultimately, I think this one, it does have a lot of power to it, but it is also very, very cryptic. It's an extremely cryptic film. It offers no easy answers whatsoever. I personally, I was quite exhilarated in just going along for the ride. It's very much, it's more of a. It's kind of hard to not make this sound pejorative, because it's not. I don't mean it in a pejorative sense at all. I actually mean it in a positive sense. But it was more like an abstract installation than it was a motion picture. But I found something quite compelling about it, actually. I thought that it did have, it's one of those movies, one of those very strange avant-garde films that, for me, provoked thought on an existential platform. And it just had, there was something elusively poignant and thought-provoking about it. But I do think, for your average moviegoer, it might not be very enjoyable because of just the lack of accessibility. It's not the sort of film, because it's very mired in sort of an esoteric sensibilities, but it's not the sort of, if you want to watch it to get to a point where everything is smack bang, this is entirely what's going on, it doesn't have that conclusion. So if you want a mood piece that is very heavily entrenched in the emotional impact of alternate dimensions and non-linear realities that you may or may not be occupying all at once, that kind of, the way that would distort a person's self-perception, because obviously the way that we perceive our lives as being linear, that structures our entire psychology. That's a big fundament to the way our psychology operates. So if you were constantly having to deal with intrusive multi-realities at any given time, it is just beyond comprehension. The kind of things that would do.
We're only set up one way.
Yes, and this film basically it posits a scenario as to what that would be like for someone, and how terrifying it would be for someone, but also how they might arguably be liberated in some ways that we couldn't conceive. In summary, it's very interesting, but it's batshit insane, and it's I don't know, just brace yourself for some utter mind fuckery.
I'm always up for mind fuckery, you know me. That sounds right up my alley, actually.
Flashback, interesting stuff, dude. Interesting stuff.
Okie dokie then. Well, that leads me into TV of the week. It's back.
Yay.
I won't review films every week, primarily because Liam is better than me.
Wow.
And secondarily because you watch a lot more films than me and I watch a lot more TV. So there we go.
This is very true.
This is how we're set up.
Stick what you know.
Two things to talk about this week. First thing up, this is a Netflix original. And the second season has just been released. And I caught all up to date with it because, very conveniently for what I do for the podcast, there's 2 seasons and there's 6 episodes each, which makes it nice and neat and easy to run through. This is entitled Ragnarok. Any awareness of this one?
I've heard people have mentioned the title to me.
Yeah, it's one of those
That's
things
about
that it often flashes up on the Netflix main page when you log in as the sort of promoted thing of the week. One of their original series, set in Norway. And, I'll go straight into the backstory, shall I? Actually, on my setup of this, I'm going to leave out a key plot development because I'd like the audience to experience it for themselves. So I'm going to give you most of what happens in the first episode, but there is a reveal in the first episode that I'm not going to go into because it's quite clever. And I actually really, to give you a little bit of a spoiler to what I think of it, I actually really rate this show. So I really want to give an explanation that gives you the nice setup of it, but it doesn't reveal too much because there is an unfurling mystery to explore. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so this opens with a family in Norway driving into the small town of Edda. And we have Turid, the single mother of the family, Magna, the young son of the family, and his brother Loritz. And they are coming back after a long period of absence. It's revealed fairly early on that the father of the family died. And so they moved away and they are now returning to this small town. Magna is staring out the window as they come into this village, and he's about 17 years old, and he's quite a big built kid. He's got his big farmer's kind of build frame, quite a dorky bowl cut haircut, and big, thick prescription glasses, what we refer to in the UK as prescription glasses. That reference won't work anywhere else. But yeah, quite thick, quite nerdy glasses on. As they're driving in, he spots a man in the middle of the road on a mobility scooter, an older gentleman, and his scooter has got stuck. So Magna immediately jumps out of the car, goes up to the guy on the scooter and attempts to give him a hand and pushes him to the side and gets his scooter running again. And a woman walks out of the nearby grocery store and says, "You're very kind, aren't you? You're really nice. What a nice kid you are." And she runs her hand across his forehead. And he thinks that's a bit strange, but everyone's sort of smiling at him kind of inanely. And he thinks, oh, this is a bit of a strange scenario. But he goes back into the car and they drive to their new house. And he doesn't really think much more of it. He awakens the next day and he finds that his glasses, he doesn't really need them anymore. He can suddenly see a bit better than previous. And his mother's quite worried about this. He says, "Oh, no, Magna, you need your glasses." But he feels great. His vision is starting to somehow return to him. And he feels a little bit stronger and a little bit faster. So he goes to school with his brother. They are introduced to the class that is running that year as the new kids turning up. And he is sat next to Isolde, who is this young girl with green hair and a bit of a sort of a punky aesthetic. And they are learning about Norse mythology. And they form up a friendship. They strike up some conversation between each other. She pokes fun at him a little bit. He doesn't mind because he's sort of a big, awkward kid. He has a huge lunch in front of him and she likes to sort of tease him about that. But a lot of the other kids at the school are quite snobby. And she actually treats him kind of nicely. There is a ruling family of this town, the Jutal family. And they own a big corporate interest in the area, this big industrial factory, and they provide a lot of jobs for the town. But Isolde is convinced that this factory is poisoning the water around them and damaging the environment. So she quickly gets Magna on side as to this family is bad for the neighborhood. No one can speak any bad of them. No one will speak any ill towards them because they're such an economic powerhouse in the town. They're led by Vidar, played by, and here's a great Norwegian name for you, Gisle Orn Garsen, who I'm sure I've pronounced your name wrong, and I do apologize. There's going to be a few of those in this. yeah, Vidar is the patriarch of this family, and his children, Saxa and Fjord, also go to the same school. And they're very much these snobby rich kids. They've got their own little clique around them, and they sort of isolate people like Magna and Isolde. Anyway, Isolde says to Magna that they should go on a hiking trip together up the mountain because she wants to test the water further up the glacier. Magna initially goes with her on this trip, but he gets a mysterious phone call and he has to go back down the mountain. And so he leaves Isolde to her own business. She discovers a crack in the glacier leading towards a mysterious door. And she takes a water sample from near it and paraglides her way back down the mountain. Apparently, this is a common thing in Norway for teenagers to go paragliding. No one thinks it's weird that a teenager is going to paraglide by herself back down the mountain. Anyway.
Fair enough.
Magna he gets back home. He discovers that the emergency back at his house was not an emergency at all. He'd been lied to. So he goes back to try and see Isolde and maybe catch up with her. And he spots her paragliding back down the mountain until she mysteriously suddenly goes off course, off track, and sails herself into some power lines above the town. Huge electrical explosion. She falls to the ground. Magna runs over to her and Isolde is unfortunately dead.
Oh dear.
Magna is furiously angry that the only connection he had to anybody in this town, the only person that treated him decently, is now dead. He suspects foul play. He thinks there's something weird going on with the fact that she was the only one protesting this family in the town and the environmental implications of it, and that all of a sudden she's ended up dying in this supposedly horrible accident, although he witnessed it, and it was a very weird thing for her to do. And he becomes angrier and angrier. He grabs his mother's sledgehammer that she was using to fix up some of the outside of the house, and in his anger, he throws it into the distance, and the sledgehammer goes for miles. And above him, lightning begins to crack and crackle in the sky.
So the kid is Thor, basically.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you know what? I'm not even going to criticize that as a spoiler because that is basically what this is doing, is a Nordic noir blended with Norse mythology. And I really, really like it because it does something very, very intelligent. It would be very easy to do this show as a bit of, and I apologize to fans of superhero media and stuff like that, but I'm going to use this phrase. This could easily turn into superhero Norse mythology influenced bollocks.
Yes.
And it doesn't, because it keeps up the Nordic noir element. It focuses on the interactions and the dramas between people within this small Norwegian town, from the kids at the school to the ruling family who are revealed to be something else. I mean, if you're into your Norse mythology, you might sort of be gathering where this might be going and what the Norse gods, their enemies were, and how they're going to tie that in. There's all this really, really clever writing underneath that could so easily be so over the top as to make you roll your eyes and switch over and watch something else. But because it keeps that atmosphere up, because it's more focused on its characters, because although there are these supernatural elements, and you see quite early on that it is deliberately doing Norse mythology, and no prizes for guessing, fans of Norse trivia, etc., who his brother might end up being, etc., etc., etc. You can see all of that coming if you know your stuff. And if you don't, it's actually a really good education as to the tales of the sagas behind that Norse thing. It actually does it so well through a modern lens that I'm quite a big fan of Norse mythology. I ended up learning some of more facets of the stories through this show. It's just conflated them into a modern lens and through a modern perspective. It's the sagas happening all over again, except this time there's an environmental aspect and there's everything's transplanted to the modern day, which is really cleverly written. Another thing I love about it is, and the thing I love about that Icelandic, Norwegian, Scandinavian, whatever you want to call it, that kind of Nordic noir, is that it really lends itself to naturalistic performances, naturalistic acting. There is some fabulous acting here. David Stackson plays Magna. Young kid, doesn't seem to have done much otherwise. Plays it beautifully, beautifully well. Really strong, solid, punchy, bold performance. He's got a really difficult job. He's this awkward kid that gradually turns into this powerhouse of Norse mythology. And the transfer actually works really, really well. It's within his abilities to do that. You've also got Herman Tomaras as Fjord, the boy of the Juttel family that is really, really playing up that slimy, sleazy thing, although there's a bit more depth to his character than that. My favorite performance actually in this, and this is a name I'm definitely going to get wrong, but this is, I looked it up earlier. Synnöve McCoy Lund plays the family matriarch for the Gittel family. She's a film critic, funnily enough.
Oh, okay.
Who's branched out into acting later in her life. She's 45, I believe. And she plays sort of the ice queen of the family so beautifully well. This is one of those ones where you watch it and you go, I'm so glad I'm watching this because I'm getting all these Norwegian actors that really, really know what they're doing. And I haven't seen them in anything otherwise. And now I really rate them when they're on my periphery. And it sort of expands your mind in that way. Also, I need to point out that this is another one of those ones that if you start watching on Netflix, it will default to dubbing and no subtitles. Again, like I said with Barbarians, when I reviewed that many, many episodes ago, please, for the love of God, just change your Netflix settings. It's very, very easy to do to the original Norwegian dialect and the English subtitles. Because hearing those lines delivered from real amazing, fantastic Norwegian actors in their native tongue, and the subtitles that go with it, and the jokes work better, and the timing works better. Please, for the love of God, if you're going to watch this, don't do the dubbing.
Is it? I don't know why my mind's gone to it, but is this show like comparable in any way to something like American Gods?
Yeah.
Is there something of similarity there?
You could make that comparison, although I'd say it's more realistic than that, weirdly. That's what I love. They could very easily float off into too far into the fantasy, and it doesn't. It remains grounded. And it's retelling these stories in a very clever way without losing any of their ethos. One of the nice tie-ins is that Magna and his classmates at school are obviously studying Norse mythology because it's an important part of Norwegian culture. So it feeds that in as well. They're learning about he's learning about what's happening to him and the events that are happening around him in relation to the Norse sagas. So it's like an education lesson, really, in that kind of mythology through that really clever, smart, modern lens. Also, it's got a fantastic synthwave soundtrack that it knows exactly when to pull in. You know, those really emotional synths and those chilled out lo-fi beats running over the background at key emotional points. It pulls that into the mix beautifully as well. It's a really, really well-balanced piece, this. And I'm very, very fond of it. I think it's excellently well done. And I'm so impressed that it didn't cross the line into roll your eyes territory. It so easily could. It never, ever gets there. It always maintains its balance. Excellent writing, excellent performances, excellent atmosphere. One of my favorite things I've seen all year. It's
Sounds
really,
a lot
really
better
good.
than I can't even remember the name of the film because it was such a piece of shit. But there was that one I did quite a while ago now with the kid from Hereditary when he finds out that he's descended from like the Norse pantheon. And,
It's been done badly
and
before.
it was
Definitely.
so diabolically shite. So this sounds pretty cool, though.
This has got so much going for it, and I just think its tone is so nice and its writing is so clever. It's spot on. I really love it when you find a show, you just go, you know what? I don't really have any critique of this. I just want more of it. It's really just balanced. I know I've said it before. I'm going to say it again. It treads that delicate line and it gets it spot on. Beautifully done.
Sounds cool. Sounds very cool.
Second thing I want to talk about this week, this is a big docuseries at the moment that's making waves, although I think for a lot of people it might be difficult to get hold of because it's premiered on PBS through Independent Lens in the US, 8 episodes. And as usual with one of these things, you've got to say if you're not an American viewer, there are other ways of getting hold of it. And I'm sure at some point it will get international release as well. This is prime for being picked up by, Amazon Prime, funnily enough, or some other big docuseries merchant. I can see this being licensed out very quickly. But it's finished just recently, 8 episodes long. And this is entitled Philly DA. And so this is the true life tale, of course. It's a docuseries. It starts in 2018 with the election of a new district attorney for Philadelphia, Larry Krasner. Now, ordinarily, this wouldn't be much of a thing to make a documentary about. However, Larry Krasner is not your average choice for a district attorney, primarily because he's made his career by being a civil rights advocate and defense attorney. He's very democratic. He's very liberal. He is the complete antithesis of every single district attorney Philadelphia has ever had, or in fact, pretty much any district attorney any member of the United States has ever had. He's a progressive. And through his work as a civil rights attorney, he is determined to make Philadelphia a better, fairer, and more legal place. Now, what's interesting about this is obviously in the UK, we're 2 Brits. We don't have an equivalent really of the district attorney. The district attorney essentially is the law. They've got a huge amount of leeway on a case-by-case basis to change the law, to change policy, to change the way prisoners are handled, to change the way cases are handled, to really make an impact on the way a city views itself in terms of its social attitude towards people that are pushed towards crime. To have a progressive one in that place, it was a massive, massive shakeup for the Philadelphia system. This documentary reveals some really interesting facts about Philadelphia. I mean, most people know that the United States is the most incarcerated nation in the world.
Yeah.
They have the highest percentage of people incarcerated per population of any country in the world. Philadelphia is the most incarcerated state within the United States. And the first thing that Larry Krasner tries to change is this sort of corporate need almost to put people in prison. Philadelphia traditionally has had DA after DA who have been tough on crime. And as a result, they've been putting people in prison for ridiculous things, or at least to a British, maybe you'd say socialist mindset. So it's absolutely ridiculous thing. So he immediately starts to shake things up. One of the first
Mostly black people.
And mostly people of color. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and this has been an outrage in Philadelphia for a long time. Obviously, Philadelphia has a huge black population and multicultural population. And they're the people that voted him in. They needed this change to happen. The first thing he does is he fires just about everybody working in the DA's office. The second thing he does is move drug possession charges to, he basically doubled the amount the policeman would arrest you for on all drugs, which is a really interesting policy change. And he changed the structure on how you're bailed. He essentially said that, look, if your bail is set below $10,000, that means that the crime you committed can't have been that serious to begin with. And if you can't afford that $10,000 or less to get out of prison, that means you're poor. So the only reason the judge would set a bail of $10,000 or less is to incarcerate people who are poor. This sucks. This isn't right. It isn't democratic. It's anti-constitutional. And he bans it immediately.
Anti-humanist as well. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and he immediately runs into, there's a policeman's union that are obviously very, very angry with him, led by a man, by the way, he's the most slug-like looking human being I've ever seen in my entire life. But there's this fraternity. This organization is called something like the Fraternity of Police Officers or something like that. And the way they fight him on this, the way they don't even try and work with him, it's essentially the DA's office versus the police force at this point, because he's got these progressive values, because he's saying, look, I want to change the culture of legality within this state. I want to make it fairer. I'm sick of punishing people because they've got a different skin color, because they're socio-economically disadvantaged, and I'm going to do it immediately. I'm going to do it brackishly, and if you don't like it, you can fight me on it. Because I'm the DA now, I'm democratically elected, and I represent the people.
Cops are supposed to enforce the law. They're not supposed to make it up. Why do they get so combative?
Some of the stuff this uncovers is really incredible. I mean, watching this is kind of like watching a real-life episode of The West Wing with a bit of The Wire in it. It's one of those ones where you have to pinch yourself occasionally to remind yourself that it's not scripted. It's very obviously not scripted. It's just such a well-done documentary. Some of the things on there uncover are so ridiculously out there, so ridiculously outrageous, you'd be forgiven for thinking that someone wrote it. They start going through, they ask the police officers for data, digital data, based on officers that have been committing crimes and have been charged with crimes. And they all put together on this list of people that are called do not calls, which means they can still be a police officer, but they aren't allowed to testify in a trial, which is absolute madness. What do you mean? So basically what you're saying is this police officer is allowed to have a badge, he's allowed to have a gun, he's allowed to arrest people, but he's not allowed to be on trial because we don't trust him. Because absolutely mad. And this data, when it gets sent over from the police force, all of the important stuff has been redacted in it. So what they do, they go into the basement of the building they're in and start pulling out the physical files, the manila folders and all that kind of stuff, and start going through. And some of the stuff they uncover, police officers that are involved in running their own prostitution rings, multiple counts of battery, and top homicide detectives and things like that as well. And this internal boys club that the police have created around themselves. As Larry Krasner correctly points out, nobody has successfully prosecuted a police officer for unpolice-like behavior in 30 years. And so he then starts pretty much from day one going, right, well, let's start going through the folders, shall we, and see who should and shouldn't be a police officer. And the ripples that it causes within this community is just amazing. It's amazing the people, the everyday citizens that fight him on it as well, and the people that are prepared to turn a blind eye to that sort of thing. Basically, what I'm saying is, if you're interested in social justice, in socioeconomic factors, in the Black Lives Matter movement, all of that sort of modern activism, you owe it to yourself to watch Philly DA. Because this is a guy that is really genuinely trying to change that. He's making the most effective attempt to change that sort of corruption that I think I've ever seen. And to watch the roadblocks that he runs into, despite his power, despite his strength, despite his intellect, despite the people he puts around him, all those hurdles he has to jump over is massively, massively intriguing. It's a real scorching docuseries, this one, and I think it's important. I think it's one of those ones where I'd say people should watch it because you need to understand how the system is working around you, how that corruption is allowed to prosper, and how difficult it is, even for someone with the best will in the world, to turn that around into something workable and usable. He's got an absolute mountain to climb in front of him. And you end up watching it and just thinking, wow, what an incredibly Herculean task this guy has. And wow, how fucked up some of those systems and procedures are that allow those kind of injustices to happen. It's a really, really scorching insight into the mechanics of how that works. And it's brilliantly done.
Some people, I mean,
I find it really addictive.
Yeah, some people are that brave, man. I mean, I've always, I love the film, but I've always looked up to Frank Serpico. And, I know he was a police officer as opposed to a DA, but, I mean, he was all on his own and he ended up taking a bullet in the face for his troubles, but he still persevered. And Philadelphia.
It's one of those ones where you hold your head in your hands watching this guy. I cannot believe this is real.
As you probably know, Philadelphia etymologically means the city of brotherly love.
It does.
It sounds like he's trying to actually make that name match the locale.
At one point, he comes across a file for a police officer that his crime was he got into a fight at a wedding. And Larry Krasner goes, well, it's Philly, come on. We'll let that one slide, okay. You know?
No, this sounds really fascinating.
It's absolutely fascinating, and I think it's an important piece of work. And actually, you linked me in really, really nicely, because my trivia this week is on Philadelphia.
Philly? Do you like Philly cheesesteak?
I do like a Philly cheesesteak, yes.
Good, isn't it? You can't really get any decent ones around here, but...
No, I think you have to go to Philly to get a good one. But I've heard they're really good in New Jersey as well. A New Jersey cheesesteak.
Jersey.
Right next door is apparently a very good one.
Why can't they fucking open up one round here? Philly cheesesteak house.
But yeah, let's have some Philadelphia trivia to finish out. And I apologize, Florida. I did you a dirty the other week by going on about Florida Man rather than Florida facts. But Philadelphia, I have actually gone for some interesting trivia. So here we go. As you said, nice link. Philadelphia is known as the city of brotherly love because it's composed of the Greek words for love, phileo, and brother, adelphos. Nice link to ancient, you wouldn't think, ancient Greek in the name of Philadelphia, would you?
It's just a shame that the nature of the place diverged so erratically from the name. But
yeah, go Larry Krasner. That's what I can say.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Philadelphia played an instrumental role in the American Revolution as a meeting place for the founding fathers of the United States, who signed the Declaration of Independence in 1776 at the Second Continental Congress and the Constitution at the Philadelphia Convention of 1787. So it's got a real massive place in US history. I believe the Liberty Bell.
It is the Liberty Bell, yeah.
Actually, I do have a little bit on that here. In 1996, as an April Fool's Day prank, the Taco Bell Corporation took out a full-page ad that appeared in 6 major newspapers saying that it had bought the Liberty Bell and was renaming it the Taco Liberty Bell. The National Historic Park in Philadelphia received hundreds of outraged calls. When the city of Philadelphia announced plans for a $1 million renovation of Love Park to get rid of skateboarders, a streetwear shoe company offered $1 million to rehabilitate and clean the park instead. The park's 92-year-old designer also protested by skateboarding in the park. God, I love that. I don't have his name here, but whoever you are, I think that's fucking fantastic.
That's some badassery there, isn't it?
Originally, squirrels only lived in forests, staying away from people, and were intentionally introduced into city parks, the first being Franklin Square in Philadelphia in 1847.
Oh, well.
That's such a cool... I love that when I found that. So squirrels are they were deliberately introduced and first in Philadelphia. That'll never come up in any trivia quiz you ever take, but it's an interesting fact nonetheless.
Well, remember, if you're in a situation where you're having to create a quiz for something or other, just drop it in there.
Yeah, no one's going to get that one, are they?
Drop it in there to fuck people up. It's always fun.
Philadelphia is home to the bizarre Mutter Museum. The museum features medical oddities such as slides of Albert Einstein's brain, a tumour removed from President Grover Cleveland's jaw, and tissue removed from the vertebra of John Wilkes Booth, President Abraham Lincoln's killer.
And it's called the what, sorry?
The Mutter Museum. It was Mutter, so I presume it's like the German Mutter.
Because that means mother, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have no idea. Maybe someone's founded by someone whose surname was Mutter. I have no idea.
Cool.
Please, we're going to get angry Philadelphians now saying, no, it's the Mutter Museum. But hey.
You British assholes.
Not the first time we've been called that.
That was not a Philadelphia accent at all.
Philadelphia is home to the nation's first daily newspaper, the Philadelphia Packet and Daily Advertiser. Its first edition was published September 21st, 1784.
Wow.
Still running. Very, very cool. And my last one here. The Walnut Street Theatre, located in downtown Philly, is actually the oldest continually running theatre in the English-speaking world. It was originally owned by Edwin Booth. You might know him as John Wilkes Booth's brother.
Oh, right. When was it opened?
Good question. Don't have it here. This is the problem with copy-pasting things from websites, isn't it? The original article is very much long gone. But anyway, it was owned by Edwin, who was John Wilkes Booth's brother.
Cool.
There you go. Lots of things you didn't know about Philly. But yes, I would so highly recommend watching Philly Day because it's been an eye-opener for me. And there was some mad thing as well about, there were a movement called, I think they were just called Move. And in the mid-'80s, they set themselves up in a Philadelphia tower block, and their whole idea was like a hippie commune thing. But they wanted to live like they were still living in the jungle, just inside a city. So they had chickens and trees and all that kind of stuff. And the police sent a helicopter in and dropped a bomb on top of the building and blew it up. It's the American...
With them inside?
Yeah, the Philadelphia police force bombed with a helicopter their own citizens. And several of them died, including multiple children. There's so much in this documentary. I was just like, no fucking way. I had no idea.
Let me guess, there were no investigations, no incarcerations.
This is one of the ongoing themes, is that the DAs have been traditionally corrupt for a very, very long time, and he may be the first that is not. He's still in office at the moment. We shall wait and see, I suppose.
They bombed.
Yeah, so a police helicopter with what they call an incendiary device suspended underneath it, and they dropped it on the roof and blew the building up. And
supposedly the United States is the antidote to people like Saddam Hussein.
It's very
Assad and all these guys.
Yeah,
because they would never do anything comparable to what they do, would they?
Absolutely blew my mind. Anyway, yeah, please do check it out, and please do check out Flashback. I'm definitely going to give that a watch. Yeah,
I mean that's a real crazy fucking film, man. But if you're into as I said, if you're into your whacked out existential concepts and things that just make you go, the kind of things that keep a stoner up until 3 a.m. going, fuck, no way.
That's stoner that stays up until 3 a.m. That is literally me. Okie dokie. Well, thanks very much for listening to our free podcast this week. We're going to go and record the premium now. This week, Liam's going to start off by talking about I believe you're talking about the Pusher trilogy, are you?
Nicholas Winding, the kind of the films that sort of kick-started Nicholas Winding Refn's directorial career. And it's an example of a trilogy where I think all 3 films are meritorious and extremely good indeed.
And then, apropos of nothing, I suppose you can make the Nicholas connection. We decided that we're going to do an actor special this week, and we're going to be talking about the films of Nicolas Cage.
Nicolas Cage, The Cage,
Cage
Rage.
Simply because we suddenly realised we hadn't done Nick Cage, and we're both huge fans, and he's got a ridiculously interesting life and career. So we're going to be chatting about some of our highlights there. Yeah. So if you're interested in any of that, please do check out cinementalist.com for a link to our Patreon page, or you can Google Cinementalist. You can follow us on Twitter at Cinementalcast, and you can follow Liam at
the Movies. My handle is at Wacko Jacko's Flicks.
Excellent. Yeah, that's all we have to say, really. Hope to see you on the premium one, if not free podcast next week. Anything to add, Liam?
Cheers, people. Hope you enjoyed the content.
Nice and brief this week.
If you didn't, you can fuck off. No, I'm only joking. Have a good one, guys. Stay safe.
Please come back. We need the listener numbers. Take it easy, guys.